Hey guys, Spreadsheet Geek here. Just want to run through a quick lesson with you today on summary data. Um, when you have a set of data, you talk about your summary data being ways to summarize that data. My last lesson that I posted was using the sum function to just add up totals. So today I look into a couple other functions. The average function, max function, and min function, other good ways to summarize your data and learn some things about your data set quickly. The basics of this lesson are that the students collect some statistics about their classmates, and then they summarize that with max, min, and average. And it's in a situation where totals aren't necessarily always the best summary for those. So it's a class statistics. The students go around and give some of their statistics about themselves while they're doing this. The other students record that. When you've collected data from everybody, basically you summarize that data with your max, min, average, and sum function where appropriate. So basically, here's how I run it. We're all working together on this one. We're all working at the same time. The kids stay pretty engaged. I have a very good turn-in rate for this, meaning I don't have many students that don't turn this in, so that's good. They also learn some things about each other, which is kind of nice for class climate. So basically, the way it works is that I open a new blank spreadsheet. I'll put it on the overhead and project, and I'll do it while the kids are doing it as well. I will get that spreadsheet set up with a couple rows at the top for a title and a subtitle and my column headers. And in this case, my column headers are the student name and some different statistics that each student should be able to volunteer for the class. So we've got stuff like the number of siblings that each student has, the number of pets that each student has, the number of states that each student has visited. So you can see these column headers that I have. So basically I set that up and I type that in on the overhead, and as I'm doing this, I have all students go along with me. If you have any other good ideas for statistics, please feel free to put them in the comments. These are just my suggestions, but there's lots of other great stuff that I'm sure would work that I haven't thought of. So I'd love to hear about them in the comments. But I'll get it set up, and then I'll give each student about a minute to think about, they might have to think about some of these things, to think about their own statistics, like how many states have I visited? And it might take them a little bit of thought to come up with that. So I'll give students about a minute or so to come up with their own data and fill that out as the first row of data. Once I've given all the students the opportunity to think about their own data and get that first row filled out, I'll just start somewhere in the room and I'll have students read their data aloud. So what's their name? How many pets do they have? How many sisters and brothers do they have? How many states have they visited? So on and so forth. So each student will read their own data. It'll take about 20 to 30 seconds probably per student. So that'll eat up some time as far as how long this lesson actually takes, because if you got a bigger class, it'll take a little bit longer to get around to everybody. But it is interesting to learn about students, so I think the time is well spent. So they'll go around and they'll read their own data, and as they're reading their own data, everybody else will record that data. And so by the end of this, you might, if you've got 20 students, you've got your top few rows and then another 20 rows of student data. Once we've got everybody's data, then I will introduce the max, min, and average functions, and we will use that at the bottom to summarize those. So it's kind of interesting to see when you're looking at the max function, what is the highest number of pets that anybody in class has. And you probably find somebody that counts all of their fish and has a few hamsters and ends up with number of pets in the teens or something. What's the most amount of siblings that somebody has? What's the least states that anybody's visited? What's the average number of pets that each student has? So you do get some interesting results, and you'll see there is a totals row on the bottom, but for some of these, I make it a point to note that some of these totals really don't make sense, and they don't give good summary, whereas the average gives a much better summary for the data than a total would. So it's a good opportunity to talk about how not every statistic has the same appropriate summary data. So we go through and we do that, and everybody lists off their data. At the end, we summarize it with totals, averages, maxes, and mins, and then we basically just turn that in, and that's what we turn in. We do, it's good to do a little bit of formatting if you've already done formatting, which you probably should have by now. It's good to do some formatting, maybe merge your cells together for the title and subtitle. Use some borders to separate the raw data from the summary data. Um, Use some other hierarchy tools like bold and centering uh, to help certain parts of your text stand out. So it's a good chance to review a lot of formatting stuff and make that spreadsheet a little more presentable. I also think it's fun if you, at the start of class, when students come if you have a prediction sheet, and I'll post one of those for you in the comments that you can use if you want one. I think it's interesting to post to have the students predict up front. So if you want to spend the first 2 or 3 minutes of class allowing students to make their predictions, they can see how their predictions turned out in comparison to what the actual data was when you've collected it from your class. So, yeah, include that's totally optional. You don't have to do that, but it does make the lesson a little more fun, so that students can look back and say, "Hey, I got that right," or "Wow, I was way off." Um, so that's about it. And a lot of the time is spent sharing data, and I do think that's important for climate, and it does allow students to make some connections and learn some things about their classmates. So I think that's good. But it also allows you to talk about some different summary stats and those really common functions that get used, average, max, and min, that are good ways to summarize data in certain situations. So I like it. I think it's a good lesson. I think it neatly packages itself into one day. I do it right after I've learned about sum, uh, and I will lead this into other functions and formulas that are useful. One other thing to note is that it's pretty easy to look at a smaller list of data and find the max and the min. So I always tell students have a tendency, instead of entering the functions for max and min, they have a tendency to look at the column above it and say, oh, well, there's a 0, that's the minimum. Or, wow, there's a 35, that's the biggest number by far, so that's the maximum. And then they just type that data. So what I'll always do is I will always, maybe at the end of it, I'll talk about how sometimes the data might change. Like if a student gets removed from class and we delete that student, and it happens to be the student that has the most pets, for instance, that number at the bottom isn't going to be right anymore. If we just typed 35 pets for that student as the maximum, but none that student's gone, that 35 is still down there as my maximum number, and it shouldn't be anymore. So I think it's a good opportunity to talk about the fact that your data might change, and if you use those functions will change when your data changes. And that's a really important part of spreadsheets, is the dynamic nature of functions. So I do think that's important to talk about in this lesson, and I talk about it in a lot of my lessons, um, to make sure that students aren't just typing in the highest number they see or the lowest number they see, or adding up numbers on their own and typing in sums. It is important to use the functions so that your summary data will change if your data changes. So I do think that's an important objective to hit here in this assignment. So I hope it's something that you can use tomorrow or in the very near future. If you like it, if you use it, I'd love it if you did a like and a subscribe, share it with your friends. Um, and feel free to use the comments below if you have any suggestions for new categories we should add or things that we could change about it. I'd love to make revisions and make this thing better. All right, thanks for tuning in. Good luck.